All right, I'm going to call the July 25th, 2023 Covington City Council meeting to order. Krista, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Porter.
Present.
Councilmember Hartsock.
Present.
Councilmember Harthausen.
I am here.
Councilmember Simomo.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
I'm here as well.
Mayor Wagner.
Yeah. Do we need a motion to excuse both Soltis and Wagner?
Yes.
So
Okay.
moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mark's looking confused all of a sudden.
Okay. Wagner and Soltis are excused. Okay, let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Hello, Regan, how are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes tonight.
Okay, I get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Any opposed? Okay. We are going to move on to reports of commissions. I understand we don't have a report from CEDIS. Is that still the case? I'm just going to double check, okay?
That's correct.
Youth Council? Do we have anyone from the Youth Council online or? No? Okay. Looks like Patty, you are here for the arts? Yep.
Good evening. I have to say this new format, having us go first, is wonderful. As much as I love attending the meetings, this is really awesome.
So Patty's saying we should change back to what it was.
But so anyway, so we had a new commissioner begin this month. Her name is Liz Hallberg. We're happy to have her, and she showed up just at the right time because she was able to just jump right in and help with Covington Days, which was very good. Final wraps for continued business. So we finally got them all completed. The last remaining one that was hit by a car has been rewrapped, and the final or the location over by Kentwood High School that had some vandalism, completely clean, easy, no problems. So that was the first one we had vandalism on. So that was like our first test, even though it had the vandalism proofing done to it, we'd never had a test on it yet. So it works. That's good to know. We, as mentioned before, we had worked with the Planning Commission on the comprehensive brand update that's been completed. And so at Covington Days, I did notice in the city's booth that they were actually using it in that on the information that they were handing out or using for the residents, and it looked great. So hopefully it'll work out for everybody. Coming up, we've got Kids Fest, and based on our Covington Days success with our musical paper drums and other musical items, we're continuing with the musical theme, and we're going to be using, we're going to be going with the theme of homemade music again. That should be interesting with the little kids and pots and pans and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of excited about that. Covington Days was hot.
Yeah.
H-O-T hot. And so it was long days, but the projects that we did have, tambourines and the paper drums, were pretty successful. We were kind of thinking the tambourines for the littler kids, but they all wanted those paper drums. So we did mostly that, but it was pretty fun. It worked out well. We went through a lot of our art supplies. I think everybody was happy. This last meeting, we also were able to finally do a review on art submitted for the rotating art project at CCP. And we had 13 artists submit art. They mostly submitted several pieces of art each, so we had a lot to pick from. It was really interesting. All the art was fantastic. Some of it was not appropriate for our location that we had, but it was all amazing. I mean, it was really good. So before we can submit anything to you for consideration, we had a couple questions for some of the artists, so we're continuing on with that process. So hopefully next week.
Oh,
I did not touch that.
yeah.
It says do not touch it. I didn't touch it. Stay. Anyway, so hopefully by next meeting, we might have something to submit for you to consider. And that is my report for this month. Any questions?
Any questions? No?
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next is the Equity, Cultural and Social Justice Commission, and David?
Thank you. Very quick, since our July meeting hasn't occurred yet, it doesn't occur till Thursday. So we will be, for this month, we will actually be doing our usual revamping for the August celebrations calendar. But then we are going to regroup after the joint meeting with all of you from a couple weeks ago, and we will start going back through the work plan that we went over with you and start itemizing and laying out our next steps forward on certain action items that we've discussed. And then I've already started discussions also with just this week with the Skiptons that, as I mentioned, that do the Kent International Festival. And we're going to be meeting next week and then bringing them in next month to meet with the commission so that we can start getting some ideas about some cultural celebrations here in Covington. And other than that, that's it. Any
Great,
questions?
thank you. Yeah, any questions? No, all right, thank you. Up next is Human Services. Is that Jessica?
Sarah Parker
Sarah,
here
sorry.
today. We're
Okay,
rotating on you
yeah,
again.
okay.
So I hear that you've already gotten somewhat of an update because most of our prior meeting was on reviewing funding recommendations, and thank you so much for funding the services. We were looking at both funds from the general fund and from HB 1590. The general fund, $20,000 for mental health and addiction support through an agency, $1,000 each to the street team and the Recovery Navigator program, with an emphasis on enhancing local partnerships and data collection using an improved system that Darren has recommended. And then also an $8,000 personal budget for Darren for those immediate needs for people that are in gaps between assistance that will allow them to get to the assistance and that is so desperately needed. And then HB 1590 was a huge pot of money that we want to make sure goes to really good services. We recommended that the SKIP funding, 50% of the tax revenues already collected be approved, which is about $438,000. And then I also, the $300,000 to Vine Maple Place to remodel their new building for behavioral health services and counseling. And then also an additional $15,000 for the mental health services that you guys approved. So thank you very much for that support and all of our local agencies supporting our communities. And then last, we reiterated our support to help Julie with a human services event at Covington Place for our local seniors. So that will be forthcoming.
Great.
Any questions?
Any questions? No, yep,
Do you have a date for the Covington Place event?
Early September.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you
Alright.
very much.
Thank you so much.
And I don't think we have reports from Parks and Rec or the Planning Commission. Okay. All right, then we'll move on to, excuse me, public communication. The communication from King County Metro has to be rescheduled, so we'll get that at a later date. So up next is a presentation from community care specialist Darren Patterson. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so for those of you that don't know, my name is Darren Patterson. I'm the community care specialist, helping to establish the community care program here for the city of Covington. A little bit of my background. I academically, I studied criminology at Washington State University. Practical background in probation parole, where I worked with several different types of specialized populations, substance abuse, drug offenders, property crime offenders, domestic violence offenders, gang offenders, and was instrumental in building a gang unit prevention program in cooperation with local, state, and federal law enforcement, which brings me into this program to help launch the community care program in cooperation with the Sheriff's Department around this concept of an alternative response, which is to say that it's intended to be a collaborative response to requests for services from law enforcement, community partners, or community members to proactively address key engrossed risk areas. As an example, you can see here some of those are, but not limited to, housing and shelter, mental health and addiction, intimate partner violence, youth and family conflict, correctional entry, reentry, and other non-emergent essential needs. And so with this in mind, I've borrowed from evidence-based practice from a noted criminologist, Dr. Robert Agnew, who established general strain theory, which is this concept of basically where somebody experiences societal strain when they fail to achieve a positively valued goal through traditional pro-social means. So by example, take somebody who maybe is working for a local Walmart, working 40 hours a week, and is maybe their rent goes up, and then maybe their Comcast bill goes up and Netflix goes up, and then that experience, what we see that science shows is it adds to the societal strain, which results in a reduction in state conformity, which is this concept of an idea. It says that what drives a lot of people from making a risk versus reward decision as rational actors. It's like most of us would love a new iPhone and be able to just walk right into the Apple store and take it. But, you know, we weigh as rational actors that part of this decision-making process, the stakes of conformity that we all have: a job, a house, a career, family, you know, all these factors add up to overall stake and conformity. And so these folks that are experiencing higher levels of strain have a reduced amount of stake and conformity, which when with the introduction of a negatively valued stimulus, such as the loss of a job, a potential crisis event like a loss of a job has the potential to become catastrophic when there isn't sufficient coping mechanisms in place. And so this concept of coping mechanisms is kind of the underpinning of what I've tended to build upon with this program, targeting those formerly mentioned engrossed risk areas with some of the agencies and partnerships we're looking to build around this program. And so as a localized example, I took the Sheriff's Department's property crime rate and also requests made to the 211 crisis connection line for various services, and took these two data sets and conducted a Pearson's correlation test and observed that there was a strong positive correlation between both 211 needs requests being made and property crime within the city, which is to say that as 211 needs requests were increasing, so too were property crime local within the city. And so with this chart, I know it could get a little confusing, but what I ask that you focus on is just the categories of unmet needs in and around basic concepts of the housing and shelter, which you see, as you can see, it rises in over a period of time, not just in its the accumulation of the amount of calls received to 211, but also the rise in the amount of unmet needs that 211 collects when somebody calls and they're not able to fully and completely meet their the inquiry of their need when they reach out to the agency. So as we can see here, we've seen increases in requests for home repair, for rental assistance and shelter assistance, that not only are they increasing, but increases in the capacity to be able to meet those needs. Similarly, what we're seeing is also increases in the amount of crisis intervention and suicide that are not only increasing in requests, but also increasing in the amount of reports of unmet needs. And similarly with, as pertains to substance use and abuse disorder and the amount of needs that are unmet. And so, in line with that as well is, the amount of food insolvency that appears to be increasing, and the amount of, their capacity to be able to meet those needs when the requests are being made to the 211 crisis connection center. And so with this, I've intended to design this program with these aspects in mind, and to try to help target specifically these certain engrossed risk areas. As I've gone along, I've had some milestones, also some barriers. And so one of the first chief of which is that finding a viable infrastructure to be able to document community care activity, because often the nature of it involves material that's sensitive to privacy regulations as it pertains to HIPAA, CJIS, and CFR, which is the substance abuse privacy regulations. And so finding a single solitary source to not only document but retain this information is something that, had we approached it from an internal perspective, would have been very cost prohibitive. And so I did some research and identified one of the essentially the only effective co-response platform that is external to the city's IT infrastructure. And so that all this is secured within an externalized database. It's not a situation where we're having to ourselves retain this documentation as time goes on. With anything, it's costly, and so I did some research and found that we were eligible for the Alternative Response Team grant, applied for it, successfully received funding for both startup costs and the annual software as a service fees for the year, and immediately got to working with them, their software developers, to address this issue that I've observed of resource siloization, which is that a lot of these community-based organizations are kind of function independent of each other. But when you're dealing with a topic such as community care or co-responding, there's a lot of what we see is a lot of comorbid issues. It's not just a person that maybe is unhoused. It's not just a person who has substance abuse. It's both and. And so accomplishing this and a reduction in siloization can be achieved through building a repository, which is what I've worked with the software developers, Gelada, to design a localized repository of local community-based organizations that allows for a multi-party and multidisciplinary communication across all facilitation of care for these individuals. So what that means in practice is, from the initial response, say that the sheriff's department receives a complaint for maybe an encampment that's popped up, and they request for me to respond and assist. I can respond, perform a needs assessment. This person might have multiple needs around maybe substance abuse, food insolvency, and housing. And so within this software, I can internally process a referral to mutually exclusive agencies in a manner that allows for all persons to be informed along all steps of the way. And so as I've gone about designing this, I've taken into consideration the need to be able to monitor this, not just the front end analytics pertaining to making referrals, but the back end, because all too often there's been this process of like handing out a pamphlet and telling somebody good luck. And for me, I've wanted to see not just, okay, hey, we referred this person for housing, but I want to know what happened. Did they conduct an intake? Did they follow up? Was it attrition? You know, it could be a lot of different variables that could come into play. And so by designing this system where basically we assign organizational profiles to the organizations, both our law enforcement partners have access to, so they can see it from their call for service to the referral, and then the community-based organization can pick it up, and we can see that activity all the way through to its end and have the analytics reported from it. And then I believe at long term will give us a better ability to perform gap analysis for the services that we're missing within the city. In addition to this, I've developed a dedicated referral process for each one of these agencies or the referral sources, where the referrals are coming from, it could be from law enforcement. We were able to isolate that, track who and where these referrals came from, could be from the library. All these different areas have their own unique URL that allows me to track and provide analytics to source back from where it came from, geographic data, and be able to show all this long-term that I think will provide a lot of excellent analytics. And I developed policy and procedure for the community care specialist field response in cooperation with the sheriff's department, basically making use of their existing computer-aided dispatch system, which will not only provide additional analytics, but also provide operational safety, because as I'm out conducting outreach, they're able to see not just what I'm doing, but where I'm at and who it is that I'm working with, and all those sorts of key critical information that are relevant to operational safety when conducting these kind of co-response activities. And so we've designed that to integrate with their existing system. And with that, I've researched and identified and tried to strategic partnerships around this concept of care coordination. Some of the chief agencies that I've worked with regularly, I have to give a shout out to the Catholic Community Services. They do great work for what the resources they have provided to them. Very well deserved shout out. Salvation Army, they're great for conducting field response and outreach and getting folks placed into transitional housing. Recovery Navigator, they have their peer specialists, which have a resource of being able to communicate with people who are experiencing substance related issues in a manner that they get buy-in, which is often hard to achieve that legitimacy when you're talking to somebody as somebody from the other side of this, trying to assist them. It can be somewhat of a cynical process. So when they know somebody and recognize, hey, I went through this, and they have that person there, it can be very helpful. And I'm pleased to announce that we've begun negotiations with AHA, which is a transitional housing which relies very heavily on criminological theory of not just providing an on-ramp, but an off-ramp. So meaning that as folks get admitted into this transitional housing, there's not just programming, it's not just housing, but it's also teaching job skills, so that eventually they'll be able to be a sustainable, independent of any kind of subsidies, to be able to provide for themselves and learn marketable skills, so that once they're admitted and they're able to graduate from the program with a skill and the ability to be subsistent. And so here we have some preliminary analytics collected through the use of Gelada. A lot of it was based on a beta build, but I'll go through it. Total amount of counters, this is collected since 5/21. 158 total encounters. We've served 25 unique care seekers. Average amount of encounters per care seeker is 6. Average amount of hours spent, 6. A lot of the activity we see have been around collateral context, so that would be with other agencies, trying to coordinate resources and follow-up activities. I expect that to change as we onboard more agencies with this internal referral process. Less of that communication will be needed. Initially, it's been a little bit of a back and forth process, getting people trained up on how to use the software and kind of going along with that. The predominant methods are a toss-up between being in person and in phone, kind of follow-up contacts, working with folks, or actually going out and interacting with them in the community. Encounters are largely successful when we interact with them. As you see here, the reasons for referral, largely around housing, non-emergent essential needs, behavioral health, substance use, and financial assistance. The majority of the time with the services we've been able to provide at least some level of services to help address their needs. And I hope to increase these numbers as time goes on, as we kind of onboard more agencies and build a response system around community care. The majority of the population we've observed is predominantly male. The age distribution is somewhat bimodal, consistent with the age crime curve. which is to say that folks usually, when they're younger, feel like they're invisible, and then they develop a pattern and it kind of comes back up. And then the ethnicity, non-Hispanic, and largely Caucasian. And that's it. Tried very hard to stay in for 18 minutes.
Thank you, Darren. Any questions? Yeah, Jill.
So this is just a random one, and I think it's because we realize that throwing money at the problem, well, does help at times. But if we throw money in your direction and it's coming to be budget season, what funding do you think you would need to make this so that all of your encounters would be more successful? What funding sources or what funding would you need for more resources to give to these people, would give to them?
I think underlying this is the strategic partners kind of that I've outlined here, like a lot of the street team does a lot of outreach, the recovery navigators, because as I'm seeing through more and more encounters, a lot of this is due to like a combination of both behavioral health and substance abuse. And so targeting that specifically, be it through the recovery navigators or Salvation Army, or with AHA, which is one of the new programs that is providing both the on-ramp and the off-ramp, so that folks are coming in and getting not just provided subsidized housing, but programming and affecting behavior change. So following a model along those lines.
Okay, so it's not really more of a, because I want this to be 100% successful. This is a big thing for all of us up here, and we appreciate everything you've been doing so far. And when Regan sent out an email about one of your successful encounters, I scared my kid jumping for joy in the house when I read it. So I just want to know what more we can do to help, and what we're lacking in to get that extra help. This presentation, which if we can get a copy of it so I can refer to it at my next PIC meeting to share some successes from Covington. But also I just want to make sure that everything that we're doing is being shown to the public as well, that we're not just throwing money at the problem, we're using that money wisely to do this, and we're using our resources properly. So thank you for this, and I'm sure I'll have another question eventually, because I'm sure one of these guys will ask something and I'll have something pop in my head.
Yes.
Debbie?
Thank you.
Mhm.
I am so grateful that you were able to connect with AHA. And when we reviewed the funding request for that, I think we were all very grateful that we've got someplace that you can refer people to. Have you already started working with them?
We're still negotiating them.
Okay. Because I was just going to ask how often we're finding that they have beds available, but that could be for later discussion.
Yeah.
Just hoping that they'll either have beds available, be able to refer you to someone else, because that fills a big gap. When you mentioned the difficulty in you tracking because of the names, are you able to use the person's name in Gelada because it's an internal only database?
When you say difficulty tracking, can you elaborate?
Well, you were talking about HIPAA and, where you've got to be careful about, I'm assuming that's putting names in a database, right?
Yeah.
So for your own use, if you go out to an encampment and you are working with Joe Smith and you want to look to see, have I already worked with Joe Smith? Have we already referred him? Are you able to put that into your database and pull it back out?
So Gelada is HIPAA, CFR, it is literally the only co-responder platform that's out there that meets all these requirements. And so, which is why as soon as I saw the presentation, I jumped on it. I knew it's the right system for this practice.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then you talked about wanting to find out, once you've referred someone to a program, you want to be able to make sure you can get that information. Did they follow up? Will you have a way through the use of Gelada or some other source to get that?
So Gelada basically creates, there's a platform inside of it that is back-end oriented that basically I can design organizational profiles per the organization based on their own individualized criteria, I can give Vine Maple Place. I utilized it just this morning. And so I send a referral for somebody that goes from them, goes to me, then I send out the referral. And then it's got a list of tasks auto-populated. They log in on their side because they all have logins. And they're able to click in and click approve, pending, rejected, client denied care or declined care rather. And so it's got that ability to be able to track the referral, not just in the form of like, hey, here's a pamphlet, good luck, but it's like, hey, here's a referral, here's a person to talk to, and this is kind of what the research I've been reading is very strong in indicating that is having this kind of continuity and not just handing off a pamphlet and wishing them the best of luck.
Exactly. Great. Thank you. That's really good to hear. Then you've got the in and out communication. Thank you very much. And thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, Beth.
Is it possible, I have a question about one of the slides, either 6 or 7. Just a data point. You can run it by me one more time. And it had to do with the column that had percentage of needs unmet. And some of them had like 0.22.
Yeah, so those are their metrics, to be clear, 211's metrics. I didn't collect that data. through their
Okay,
reporting
so
system.
what they're trying to basically say is that for whatever that line item is, 78% of that person's needs, or all of, I was confused about what need exactly they were referring
Go back into
to.
it.
It might be easier to see it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just this one's fine too, right? So low cost housing, they had 91 counts in 2021 or 2020 to 2021. Percent of needs unmet 0.03. So they're saying 99.97% of needs are met,
So when they call, they make a request, and whether that request is somewhat met or fully met, it's some like an amalgamation of that figure. So when somebody calls for assistance, they would narrowcast it by like low cost. I'm looking for assistance for low cost housing, and so that figure is reflective of their ability to meet the need that they're specifying. And in many cases, there may be multiple needs, and so they're kind of aggregating. The person who has an inquiry may say, I need low cost housing assistance, home repair assistance, and mortgage assistance. And so they're having to kind of take that figure and assess whether or not they met all of that request.
so to me, it looks like a lot of these are really good numbers, because I'm just confused why they say needs unmet. Why don't they just say we met how many needs? It seems
Their nomenclature.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, all right. And then the other question too, when you were talking about a referral to Vine Maple Place, for example, use that as, how does that person get, if they don't have transportation, how are we getting them to, if they're willing to accept it on the spot? I know sometimes we try that. Yeah. I don't think the officers are able to do that because, they may not be available to do that, and
Sure.
you're not doing it personally.
Yeah.
For safety reasons.
So I've recently received approval for the King County Metro vouchers that we can provide. That's just one option. But AHA comes on site and will pick people up for their program. So they will literally come with their peer specialists and do their own individual needs assessment, and then get them transported to their parent location, where they'll have an intake and kind of get them assessed at one of their 4-tier programming needs, and get them placed into that transitional housing. So,
And then with AHA, I mean, it sounds like great, like to Debbie's point, fantastic partnership. Do you know what the capacity is for AHA to be able to meet the needs of everyone that you refer, that
yeah.
at night, in the middle of the night, I'm guessing for something like some.
So as I understand it, they're currently providing services for the state. That's how I learned about it, was through Department of Corrections. They provide on a much larger scale. So I think they have the bandwidth to be able to handle.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Jennifer.
One more, well, maybe 2 more about the data. You said this data is specific to city of Covington.
This year, yes.
And
By
would that be like 98042 zip code Covington?
It
you
doesn't
think?
go narrower than that.
Okay, and then lastly, are there publications regarding what are the primary drivers for these giant jumps in 2022, 2023? Because like the counts in some cases don't necessarily change a bunch, but the percentage does increase. I mean, exponentially from 0 to 22.03 to 15. I mean, what is happening that's causing this? I know you're on the more like reactive fix it, but really from a council's perspective, we really need the information on how to keep these numbers from climbing so high to begin with, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been based on my, and again, I kind of fall back on the criminological side, so I take the stance of having a series of maybe absence of coping mechanisms in place for given needs. So if somebody gets potentially laid off from a job, and it's a crisis event to any of us, right? But that crisis event, when they reach out to an organization, 211 or the city for assistance, and we're able to, not able to provide that assistance, I think that potential crisis situation can become catastrophic. And so that's kind of what I'd hope to
But
target.
why 2022, 2023? What has caused this giant jump in percentage of unmet needs?
There's a lot of opinions.
But no,
Consistent.
okay. I mean, I have lots of ideas, but I'm just wondering, like, someone should be looking at this data and actually tying it to real world events, correct? Unemployment factors, number of available housing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Agreed.
Cost increases.
right, I mean.
Yeah, no.
I gotta.
Any other questions? No? Well, Darren, I appreciate you presenting. I just had one, and it's go back one slide to number 4, I guess, if you can. And so, yeah, you mentioned here that there's a strong correlation between crime and calls for assistance. Property crimes, yes. Just made me wonder, how are we tracking success going forward? And I'm just thinking out loud here that as your services become more known and available, I could see more calls for 211 going up. But it's possible property crimes may not be going up. So I guess I'm just wondering, what's the metric to determine what success is? Is it more calls? Is it more getting more people into services, getting fewer people into services? I don't, how do we say we're heading in the right direction?
Yeah, for me, the target's always been harm reduction.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of key areas, again, from a criminological perspective, a reduction in property crime, that's a civic good that I would argue is a positive from the result of this. Accomplishing alternative response. There are other metrics, reduction in call volume for like low acuity calls for our law enforcement partners who are they're able to spend more of their time on doing police work as opposed to doing, more of the care coordination aspect that the need has risen, and so for me, I've taken that perspective of trying to achieve a reduction in like property crime or other key metrics. And also at this point, it's been kind of a data gathering effort to see what the problem is. As I came into this, it's like with anything, I need data, I need information, I need to see what the trend is, what's going on. And then from there, kind of figure out, okay, well, what resources do I have available to me locally, and begin to double down in providing those services and conducting outreach efforts for the substance abuse that's rising, mental health, and but on the back end of that is the partnerships that we have to build. And so,
Sure. Appreciate that.
yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we now move on to the public comment portion of tonight's agenda. Speakers will state their name, address, and organization. Comments are directed to the city council, not the audience or staff. Comments are not intended for conversation or debate and are limited to no more than 4 minutes per speaker. For attendees participating virtually, click the raise hand button in Zoom. For attendees participating by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Once the city grants you permission to speak, press unmute if participating virtually, or dial *6 to unmute if participating by phone. Notice to all participants pursuant to state law RCW 42.17a.555, campaigning for any ballot measure or candidate in City Hall and or during any portion of the council meeting, including the audience comment portion of the meeting, is prohibited. So do we have anyone in the audience that wants to address the council? Seeing no one approach the council, anyone online? No hands? Okay, so we'll close this public comment portion. There will be a second one at the near the end of the agenda. So we'll move on to approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda has been approved. So now we're going to move on to new business item number 1. Consider appointment to the youth council. Does the council wish to take action? Debbie?
Thank you. I move that we appoint Sarat Dinsa to fill position number 7 on the youth council with the term expiring June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Sarat Dinsa to fill position number 7 on the youth council with the term expiring on June 30th, 2024. Debbie, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you. Some of the comments that she made and questions that she answered that stood out to me were around what changes would she make and what does she hope to achieve on council. And I think it was very mature in her thought process when she said that, you know, a lot of us think about changes and she thinks about changes, but instead of just thinking about them and maybe just talking about it, she wants to get involved to actually do something about it. Things such as litter and trash. And then talking about some of the things she sees happening in school that she feels we could address are around kids not going to their classes or not even showing up for school and vaping in the bathroom. And she feels that the youth council could have some positive influence on those things.
Thank you. Beth, did you wish to speak to your second?
Yeah, everything that Debbie said, and one of the other interesting answers I thought was interesting was when she was talking about what she thought was the best way for the city to communicate with youth, and that going out and talking face to face and having those personal connections is likely to be more effective than just using social media. Having that face to face personal connection could be a way to help address some of those issues and build those relationships. And I thought that was an interesting perspective from a school student.
Yeah. Anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to appoint Sarat Dinsa to fill position number 7 on the youth council with the term expiring June 30th, 2024. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so Sarat's been appointed to the youth council. Congratulations. All right, let's move on to a new business item number 2, discuss solid waste rate restructure contract amendment. And Don, and is it Sheila or Shelley?
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. We actually have Jeanette Jurgensen with Been There Consulting is our expert on this, and she actually has a presentation for us. So I will turn it over to her. Jeanette?
Great.
Thank you so much. Good evening, council and guests. I'm Jeanette Jurgensen from Been There Consulting, and I've been helping the city with the solid waste contract amendment due to the King County rate restriction. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide council with information on the proposed contract amendment with Republic Services to incorporate King County's new rate restructure into customer rates. King County Solid Waste Division is moving to a revenue neutral utility model in 2024. So currently, most of their revenue is derived from the per ton tipping fee. And the new model is going to have a fixed annual charge per city plus a reduced ton tipping fee. And I use revenue neutral in the fact that the county is expected to raise the same amount of revenue under the old model as the new model. This rate restructure is expected to stabilize revenues and establish a funding source for non-disposal programs such as recycling and waste reduction. And it is important to note that this change is allowed by the city's ILA with the county. And the reason we're here is because the rate restructure has an effect on our collection contracts. Currently, your collection contract allows customer rates to be adjusted annually in two ways. The first is the service component is adjusted by CPI. The second is the disposal component is adjusted by the change in King County tipping fees. So the current contract does not allow for the collection of the fixed annual charge. So we need to amend it so that Republic can collect this money from residents to pay the county. Cities have worked together with their haulers on how to distribute this fixed annual charge across the customer base. So most, if not all, Republic cities will all have the same way of calculating the rates with this fixed annual charge. The county assigns each city a fixed annual charge based upon the previous annual garbage tonnage contribution. So for example, in 2024, King County's overall fixed annual charge is $22.6 million. Covington contributes about 1.3% of the overall city garbage tonnage. So your FAC is $294,000. Republic Services will be collecting this money from customers and paying the county. This money will not be transferring through the city. And then King County tipping fees, the fixed annual charge, and customer counts do change annually, so these calculations must be done every year. In your packet, you'll see the full details of all the calculations, but I'm going to go through a very brief overview. The fixed annual charge is going to be converted into a per ton rate based upon the previous full year's garbage tonnage. So for 2024, we're going to be looking at 2022 tonnage because that's the last full year we have data for. The fixed annual charge per ton rate will then be added to the King County tipping fee to create a composite commercial rate. This composite commercial rate will then be adjusted annually by the difference between the initial fixed annual charge per ton rate and the updated fixed annual charge per ton rate using actual tonnage. And so again, this is in your packet, all the calculations, but basically because there's a big 2-year gap and we know there's growth over time, this is adjusting it so your residents aren't overpaying. And so this is one of the fairest ways to adjust the rates under this model. This adjusted composite commercial rate will then be used instead of tipping fees to calculate the annual rates. Nothing else will be changing in your contract, just the way this is calculated. The fixed annual charge will be included within customer rates, so it will not be listed separately on the bill. However, King County has agreed to develop customer education about the fixed annual charge.
so that if residents want and businesses want to know about it, what it's going to be used for, that information should be on a website later this fall. And the average resident with a $25 monthly garbage bill will expect to pay approximately 75 cents more per month for disposal, plus there'll be the annual CPI increase. So I mentioned in the beginning that this rate restructure is revenue neutral. However, I also mentioned there would be a 75-cent increase in disposal cost. And that's because the rate restructure coincides with a 9.6% increase. So they're happening at the same time. That 75 cents is due to the rate increase, not due to the rate restructure. Covington's 2024 FAC is $294,000. Again, the city is not paying this money. It's being collected from customers through Republic to be paid to the county. The exact rates will be calculated in the fall when CPI and FAC numbers are available. So the approval of this amendment is to be looking at the calculations and the methodology, not the exact rates. Those will not be available until the fall. So staff recommends that the City Council approve the proposed contract amendment with Republic Services to incorporate King County's new rate restructure into customer rates. And the next steps will be to adopt the solid waste collection contract amendment at a future council meeting. And then I'm available, as well as Program Supervisor Bates and your Public Works Director, to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, any questions?
Mhm.
Beth? Any? No?
Just on a matter. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
So is it fair to say that one of the reasons that they are implementing this FAC charge is because they anticipate with all the goal of reducing landfill, because we're trying to reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost in the whole. They're going to be lacking revenues from tipping fees at a landfill, and they're trying to make up that deficit by charging as if we were still using landfill to the rate that we were.
Pretty much. They have broken up the rate restructure where the tipping fee should cover the disposal of garbage, even when that number decreases. And the fixed annual charge will be covering non-disposal programs like recycling and waste reduction.
Okay.
So very, very slight variation, I believe, on what you said.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Appreciate the presentation. It's probably might being a little slow, but it seems to me that rates could be going up and down depending upon this. What was it? FAC? What would that stand for?
Fixed annual charge.
Fixed annual charge, and that's dependent upon whatever the previous year's tonnage was. Is there, I guess I'm just wondering if there's any way for residents to predict, with general assurances, how much their rates are going to be from year to year? Will we see dramatic increases and decreases? I'm just concerned about dramatic increases, obviously.
That is an excellent question, one that I have myself. Because your fixed annual charge is based upon what the county sets as their overall fixed annual charge and your contribution to the garbage tonnage, it is extremely hard to predict what that number will be. I do anticipate it to change slowly and not to have wild swings in rates as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. And I know you don't have any control over that, but that I think I'm anticipating that the public can see dramatic changes in their rates. That's one area where we may want to provide feedback to the county on, saying that it seems like that has the potential to have these very wide swings. So, yeah, anyway.
Thank you. I will work with your staff.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So just for clarification, the only way that the community can help residents can help to get that annual tonnage down for next year's rate, FAC rate, is that we all pitch in, not pitch in garbage, but we all
Right.
pitch in to reduce the amount of garbage
Reduce
that
the
we,
amount of garbage, yeah.
okay. All right,
Any other questions? All right. Well, this was just for discussion tonight, so yeah, thank you very much.
And I would just clarify a
Tom.
little bit with that.
Yeah.
Is that wanted to present the methodology and that type of thing, and pretty much if councils understands that and that's pretty much the direction that it's going everywhere with all the cities, but we would be bringing this back in the either August or September. It might be more like in September for that to be the actual rate restructure contract would be coming back at that time. So just wanted to make sure that that's all good, and primarily just answer any questions here tonight. So.
Okay.
So. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Okay, next, new business item number 3, request authorization to utilize vehicle reserve funds and authorize city manager to purchase vehicles and equipment if funding is in the equipment replacement funds. Don.
Yes, me again. Thank you. Just a couple of things, just as history a little bit on this. If you recall, as years ago, as we were implementing bringing in maintenance in-house versus from King County, some of the things we were trying to build a maintenance team, which included also equipment. So a lot of the things as we were coming on, we didn't have resources to put in enough to have like equipment replacement for those vehicles. And as we grew, some of the vehicles that we were holding on to because we still needed to, because we were growing, we held on to those vehicles and didn't have equipment replacement funds for those. One of those was our 92 international dump truck. And I know that council, over the years, we've been working on trying to improve that, and we've been doing great in that. This is just one of those, the last budget, we were able to include $230,000 in the budget for that replacement of that vehicle. And in the previous year, in 2020, we also set aside $200,000 in the vehicle reserve fund to cover overruns, like we're basically asking tonight. So as we were going through this, some of it again is going back to how difficult it is to be getting vehicles and things like that, and then outfitting them as well. The cost of those we keep seeing going up. The cost for everything we showed in there for this vehicle, it ended up being about $271,000. So that's a shortfall of $41,000 for that. And then having the sander and plow with that, there were funds in that allocated as well, and there were some shortfalls with that. So the total shortfall for those to basically outfit that vehicle to basically mimic our existing dump truck. So we have 2 vehicles then that would be able to function as swap loaders, which means that those pieces of equipment can be off loaded, or basically the bed with a hook that grabs on and puts a dump bed on it, or it drops it and it picks it up and grabs us the sander and that type of thing. So both of those vehicles would then operate like that versus what we had right now with the international, which would be just limited and not being able to utilize the equipment quickly. So that is that first piece. And then as we were going through this, one of the pieces that we were wanting to clarify and bring back to council was last year when we talked to council about the challenges of responding quickly to narrow windows when we can order vehicles, was to delegate that authority to the city manager. And when we said that, the language in it said in the budget. And what we wanted to do was the intention was it was in the equipment replacement fund. And the difference being in that is like, we could be, for instance, this year needing the window opens for the vehicles for next year. We would, and the funds are in there in the equipment replacement fund, but we haven't technically passed the budget for the next year yet. And so we want to at least be able to order the vehicle, even though it would, be next year before we get it. What we're requesting is that clarification in that if the funds are in the equipment replacement fund, that authority would be to the city manager to be able to purchase that vehicle. So that's the kind of the two prong or the two motions that we have on here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No. Okay, council wish to take action?
I move to utilize $61,679.51 from the Vehicle Reserve Fund to cover the shortfalls for the replacement of the 1992 International Dump Truck and associated equipment.
Second.
So it's been moved in the motion's been moved and seconded. Joe, do you want to speak to your motion?
We have the reserve fund for a reason. We have a budget for replacement equipment, and when we need to dip into reserves to make sure that we're getting the equipment properly, it's what we do. I think it's responsible for us to make sure we have those reserves in case of shortfalls or in case of emergencies. And the truck's 30 years old. It's time to replace it. It's going to cost us more to repair than to replace. So,
Beth, do you wish to speak to your second?
No, Joe. Hit all the points.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to utilize $61,679.51 from the Vehicle Reserve Fund to cover the shortfalls for the replacement of the 1992 International Dump Truck and associated equipment. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So motion's been passed. Does the council wish to take further action? Yes.
I would like to delegate purchasing authority to the city manager for vehicles and equipment that have funding available in the equipment replacement fund for that vehicle or equipment.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Motion's been moved and seconded. Jennifer, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just to say that clarifies what we meant back in December to allow the city to flex quickly and get equipment that we need, specifically in this situation for keeping our roads safe, and that is primary importance.
Debbie?
Agree to what Jennifer said.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to delegate purchasing authority to the city manager for vehicles and equipment that have funding available in the equipment replacement fund for that vehicle or equipment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that one's been.
I just want to hear Sean read that again.
Yeah. Not one of my strong suits, so. All right, well, that brings us to the end of new business. So now up to future agenda items. You all have that in front of you. I guess Regan, is there anything to add or?
Nothing from me unless council has something they'd like to add to a future agenda.
Yeah, and did we say when King County is gonna come back? Is that the next?
August 8th.
August
Yep.
8th, okay.
Yep.
All right. Oh, so next meeting, okay. And it looks like it's pretty hefty agenda for next time, so just come prepared, I guess. Okay, so that brings us now to council and staff comments. So I will start with Adam.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
So you might be having a power surge.
Yeah,
So we have National Night Out coming August 1st. There's been another neighborhood that's added on. There may be one more, so we may get up to 10. And we'll have those out to you to sign up here shortly, so. Just wanted to give you an update on that.
Thank you. Darren? Okay, Don?
Just one thing on our SR 18 project, I think I've said this before, but the contractor will be not this weekend, but next weekend be closing the interchange there at 256 and 18 and doing all the final paving and should be wrapping that project up with that. So long time coming,
Yeah.
looking good. We have had a little bit of vandalism and stuff there that we're dealing with. They actually have been taking some trees and different things like that. So in fact, I think you saw maybe some of it had some basically astroturf there. They actually cut that in places and kind of rolled up pieces really nicely though. So I'm sure but anyway, again, some challenges we're having with that. So hopefully we can get that cleaned up and maybe not have as many problems.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
All right,
That's it. Thank you.
thanks. I'm gonna go online now. Casey?
Good evening. I just wanted to mention that our April sales tax information came in. We just received it in June, so we have that 2-month leg. And our revenues have decreased about 10% from the same time last year. Our construction was down, our retail was down, and 4 of our 5 top retailers were also down. But what I will mention is we anticipated some of this and we really ratcheted down our budget this year. So we're still at 51% of our budget on a cash basis. So all things remaining the same, we're hopefully right where we need to be for the year, but definitely something that we're keeping an eye on. We also participated in a Washington State forecast update today. They're actually predicting a 3rd and 4th quarter recession, just a tiny little dip. They have a 0.5% dip in GDP that they're showing for 3rd and 4th quarter. And then they're expecting that to rebound 1st quarter of 2024. So super minor, might not even affect us, but definitely something we're keeping an eye on. So I just wanted to give you that update.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Selena?
Good evening, council. I have nothing for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ethan?
Yeah, good evening, council. This is the fun time of year where I get to kind of plug the upcoming city events. So Fridays, we're into our summer concert series. We had our first one last Friday, and we have 2 more coming up on this Friday and then the next one. Those are at 6:30 at Covington Community Park. That's all I got.
Thank you. Regan?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Smith and council. I just wanted to give a shout out to the city council, but also all the staff that really pulled off Covington Days and continue to make that. And like Ethan mentioned, all the other events that we hold throughout this summer, really impactful and successful. And so thank you to Public Works, Parks and Rec, police, everybody else who was involved. It was a great event.
Thank you. Mark?
There's no executive session tonight, and I have no further report. Thank you.
Thank you. Krista?
Good evening. I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Beth?
No, I have nothing.
Okay. Debbie?
I was just gonna say that on the skateboard meeting last week, we had a pretty thorough update on all of the changes happening at SeaTac, and it looks very impressive. So I'm getting a copy of that slide deck. If anybody wants a copy, I'm happy to send it out to them. And then King County Metro gave an update on how all of the improvements that they're making on the I line, which is their bus rapid transit, and it runs between Kent, Auburn, and Renton. So they got through talking about how great that was, and I raised my hand and asked if they'd given any consideration to infiltrating some of the neighboring cities such as Covington, and they said that while they're reassessing the needs of other cities, they did complete that assessment back in 2019, and then it was thrown out because of COVID and the decline in ridership. So I think my next encouragement to them is that we need to get another study done because the neighboring cities are just being left out. So that's all I had to share.
Okay. Jennifer?
I don't have anything either.
Okay, Joe.
Thank you for giving me some ideas of what to hound Metro with at the next RTC meeting in September. I appreciate that, Debbie. You and I can yell at them together.
All right.
So I have had a busy month. I got to go to the Metro South station in Tukwila this last week, where they were talking about the electrifying of the fleet. I have a really cool picture of I thought about sending to everybody, but then I realized Mark would yell at me. So I just kept it handy on my phone to show you if you want, of how they will be charging the buses at the station. It is pretty cool. We got to see them, see one of the drivers get in the bus, hit the button and the arm drop down to start charging it. It took us 15 minutes to find someone who knew how to do it, because it was 4:30 in the afternoon. Most of the people there were trying to go home. So it was just, who wants to stay for an extra 15 minutes? So that was fun to get that talk and understanding that they're going to be having possible charging stations along the routes as well. So if you start seeing these pink bases next to bus stops, that is because they're going to put some power stations there so they can charge the buses. So pay no attention to it. It's just easy to make things go on it. If something gets damaged, it's easier to replace it if they're on those things. So second, I had pick, and I had Krista send you all the pick packet. I don't know if any of you read it or not, but item number 7 on the pick packet was about salary commissions and or how do each cities plan their salaries and whatnot for their council and staffs and all of that. And salary commission is just basically for the council. I thought it was interesting. At first I was like, man, maybe that one, I'm happy we do it our way. But then we started talking and it goes, it's more of a transparency thing, because the salary commissions are residents, are filled with residents. They don't have to meet annually. They can meet like every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or meet once. We don't like it, we never have to do it again. One of those wonderful things. As long as you don't pull a Redmond and disband them halfway through their term and get a bunch of bad press. But it's one of those things I was looking at, and it might be something we want to look at doing here in Covington. One of the benefits is it takes something off of Noreen's plate. Other thing is it gets residents more involved. And a third thing is, if once they make their recommendation, if it doesn't go to a referendum on the ballot, everyone gets the new pay. If it's a pay raise, everyone gets it within 30 days. If it's a pay decrease, you get that. You would decrease after your term is up, and you would get reelected, or the new person comes in. It might be worth looking into. There is an RCW. I can read it off to you, or I can just tell you off right here so you can look at it on your own. But it might be something we look into. It might be worth it. So, other thing is, today they had the King County Council meeting, and they had general comments available, and a lot of residents from Covington spoke about the battery energy storage system. I did get a chance to listen in on some of them. Some people who weren't here at our regular meeting to give comments gave comments at the county council, and apparently county council is going to be doing something at their August 22nd meeting. I logged in late, so I wasn't able to hear what it all says, but there's that. I had a good time at Covington Days. For a guy who doesn't like parades, I had fun at the parade. And send me a list of all the places you want me to go for National Night Out. I'll be there. Bring my kids, they enjoy it, or at least one of them enjoys it. The other one just gets dragged along with dad. So
Thank you. I just had a couple things. I enjoyed Covington Days as well. I thought the city staff and the council did a great job interacting and coordinating and managing that. So I haven't heard any complaints or that there were any hiccups or anything. So that's outstanding. As to the BES issue, actually King County introduced an ordinance today to create regulations on how to manage battery energy storage facilities in King County. It was just dropped today. I haven't read it yet. But it looks like they are getting or taking feedback from the community on that we take some action on this.
Do you know if it's managing the construction or managing the operation?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I haven't read it.
Because I was
but
fascinated
yeah.
that the operation is not regulated
Yeah,
in
yeah.
any way.
Yeah,
That
don't know.
was horrifying.
So that'll be something I think we'll want to look at and obviously want to send our letter to King County during the comment period on this new ordinance. But I think we should take a look at what they're proposing and possibly if council may want to provide comments on it. Just to make sure they're looking at maybe citing criteria, that sort of thing. So maybe I'll talk to Regan offline about how we would do that, because I know the meeting's coming up on the 22nd, as Joe said. Anyway, Regan, do you have a thought on that? See you leaning forward.
Well, Selena and I actually discussed this a little bit today, and so I think that's something we can do if you want to talk offline.
Okay.
About any comments the council would want to make. We need a council decision at the next council meeting
August 8th.
in order to have a unified voice for
Okay.
August 22nd.
That's it. So I guess that brings us up to our second public comment period. Speakers will state their name, address, and organization. Comments are directed to the city council and not the audience or staff. Comments are not intended for conversation or debate and are limited to no more than 4 minutes per speaker. For attendees participating virtually, click the raise hand button in Zoom. For attendees participating by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Once the city grants you permission to speak, press unmute if participating virtually, or dial *6 to unmute if participating by phone. Notice to all participants, pursuant to state law RCW 42.17a.555, campaigning for any ballot measure or candidate in City Hall and or during any portion of the council meeting, including the audience comment portion of the meeting, is prohibited. So anyone in City Hall and wants to address the council? Anyone online? Can you raise your hand? No? Okay, well, we'll close that public comment period. We have no executive session. So this meeting is adjourned and I can't read the times at 8:17.